What up, Maury Squad? It's your boy Remmorii back with another video. I hope you guys are doing well. It's been a while since I posted last, but today I kind of want to talk about who it is that we are really. Feels like we come across so many different versions of ourselves, so many different environments, so many different situations where we question, like, is this really us? Is this really me? Am I the version of me that I see myself as? Do other people experience me in the same light that I experience myself as? And the answer is often no, we don't. No, we don't experience ourselves in the same way that other people experience us, nor do other people experience us the same way that we want to be perceived. And is that okay? Is that fine? I think personally, yeah. I think not everybody is meant to experience us the way that we think we should be perceived. I think the way that we are is a constant unfolding. It's like a book. You see a cover of a book, you understand, ooh, this is an interesting book. I'm intrigued by reading it. You may read the synopsis on the inside cover or the back of the book, but you don't necessarily know what the book is about until you read every page. And even as you're reading every page, you have predictions, you have thoughts on how the book's going to unfold, but very rarely are you right. Very rarely is it accurate until you get to the end of the book and you actually see, oh, this is how the book ends. The author had a very dedicated plan that I couldn't see while I was reading the book, and that is exactly how we are. We are a book that other people read in real time, and they're constantly trying to assume that the way that we are is the way that we should be, or the way that we are is how they interpret us as. But we are the author for our own stories, so we're the only one who knows how it ends. And it's not our job to tell the reader, based off of where they're at, how the story is going to end. It's our job to give access to the book. It's our job to write our own story and ensure that people receive it. Our job is visibility. Our job is to put ourselves out there and to be ourselves at the same time. And it's other people's responsibility to read the book. It's not our responsibility to read who we are out loud to other people. And that may be so hard because there's so many things that come across our daily lives that feels like it needs clarity. We need to tell people who we are and what we're about. And that takes so much energy out of us. And it feels like, wow, just living and being myself is so exhausting. But that isn't actually what's required of us. What's required of us is to live to the most authentic version, the most real version, the most us that we can be. And one way that I really like thinking about the idea of self is to think of it as a giant glove. This is going to sound weird. You can also think of it as a costume, but basically you are in a costume and you are trying to fit into the costume every day as best as you can. You may lose weight, you may gain weight, you may get taller, you may get smaller depending on the environments that you are in, but your goal as a human is to wear your costume as as good as you can, as well as you possibly can. And sometimes that becomes hard because some days your costume feels very tight, some days it feels very loose, and that's based off of our growth. That's what I like to call growing pains, because when we are growing and expanding and stretching ourselves, our costume stretches. But then there are days where we're constantly oscillating between a former version of who we were and the version of us that we are now. So the version that shows up doesn't always fit into the costume, even though we've expanded, even though we've stretched, even though we've pushed ourselves as we should. But remembering that, oh, yesterday I expanded. Now I need to remember what it feels like to be in that expansion and sit in that until that becomes the new norm, until that becomes the new comfortability. It's kind of like when you go to a new city and your brain expands and you're like, oh, there's this street and there's this cafe at that side of the street. Your brain doesn't automatically digest the new experience as being familiar until you revisit it multiple times. But your brain now has an awareness of what the new reality that you weren't previously exposed to. It now has awareness of what that new reality is. And that's all we're trying to do, to constantly expand ourselves, to to expand our costume so that we are constantly able to be a better, a newer, more authentic and refined version of ourselves so that we're actually fulfilled. That's the goal, right? It's not happiness, it's not joy, it's peace and fulfillment. Once we have that with who we are, we no longer need to seek anything that's outside of ourselves. And that's always the goal. And that's the way that I like to think about who we are. Yes, when you're angry, there's a different version of you. Yes, when you're angry, there's a different version of yourself. Yes, when you're upset, there's a different version of yourself. Yes, when you're sad, happy, so on and so forth. But all those versions of you, once you've introduced yourself to it, once you've been exposed to it long, once you've been exposed to it multiple times, you do tend to realize that there's similarities across these multiple versions of ourselves that don't feel different, that don't feel separate from who we are. They're just different interpretations. And sometimes people will only see us in the version of us that's upset or sad or angry, and then chalk that up to the entire version of who we are. But we know that that's not true. And it's like, oh, don't take me seriously. I was upset. I was sad. But it's like, those are still part of your emotions. That's still part of the ethos of who you are. Somebody who knows you fully has seen all of those things across multiple different versions of you in order to sum up the entirety of who you are. And that's the most authentic version of who you are. And that's not to say that you should never get angry or sad or never be happy and only present yourself in the best light possible. But it's, how can I present myself in the most authentic version of myself possible that I want to be represented in, and that I want to be represented in, and how do I allow people the luxury of experiencing me in my potential, in my growing, while still providing space and grace for me to just be, for me to just stumble, for me to make mistakes, for me to wander, for me to explore. Like that's every day that we are awake and are trying new things and are trying to fit into our costume is a day that we've never experienced before. So how can we tell people, hey, this is how I'm going to show up tomorrow if we've never experienced tomorrow? We have to allow ourselves the grace to be different in tomorrow and be confident that the similarities of the tomorrow's version of ourselves will still appear as yesterday's. But there's going to be a sense of newness because we've never interacted with tomorrow before. But that doesn't take away from who we are today. It just means that the point of why we do what we do, the point of our expansion is to learn more about ourselves by trying new things, by putting ourselves in new scenarios, by living out the life that we've always wanted to live. Like to fulfill our dreams. Like there's always a sense of separation when we achieve our dreams because the person that envisioned it, the person that dreamt up the dream, isn't living in the reality of the person who achieved it. And it's like, wow, who am I now? What am I supposed to go for now? Why do I feel like this now, even though this is how I thought I would feel? Because the version of you that created this dream, the version of you that wanted to live out this dream and had an idea of who you would be like, doesn't exist anymore. And that's okay. There's remnants of that person within you, but they're not there. The version of you that is present today experiences this present reality differently. And that's the whole point of how can I experience reality every day in the fullness of who I am, in the fullness of myself, without being judgmental, while allowing myself to make mistakes, while trying new things, while being curious about myself and about life and myself and life in relation to other people and how I show up. Yeah, I guess to sum it all up, it's who we are really can't be defined by simple words. It's simply an ongoing experiment and experience in who we are. And our job to figure out who we are is to constantly be curious, test things out, follow our interest to the highest degree possible with no intention on the outcome, by just being, by just experiencing, by just living. That's our job. Our job is to live as ourselves, not to try to be somebody else so that we can get recognition or anything else. Our job is just to be ourselves because being ourselves is who we are, really. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave any comments or questions that you might have, any videos that you might want to see, but like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys another time. Thanks for joining.